Forget everything you've heard about Bilstein. These new 8112 ZoneControl coilovers are their new flagship product, and they perform like nothing else they've ever developed before. Now, this review is going to deal with not only the 8112 DSA Plus, which we have here, all these knobs, but this is also going to apply to the 8112s in general without the adjustments. The pavement and daily driven comfort on these shocks is incredible. Buttery, smooth, pillowy around town. That's not something that you've heard before in relation to a Bilstein product that is typically more described as firm, sporty, even harsh by some users. That is not what you get in this flagship package. But forget daily driven comfort. These shocks are actually purpose built for one thing, and that is high speed off-road performance. And so if that's not in your style, then these things are going to be overkill for you. Now, I've had the chance to test most brands on the market across Fox, King, Icon, Eibach, Rancho. All of these guys have been in the space providing shocks for the Tacoma, and we've had 10 or 11 different sets on my Tacoma right here, along with being behind the wheel of various customers and friends of ours on other packages as well. And when I say that I am utterly impressed by the 8112s here that deliver something that no other package can, I think that says a lot, considering we have over 100,000, 150,000 miles of testing across various suspension packages for the Tacoma. If you haven't already seen our overview and unboxing of the 8112 DSA Plus on our channel, subscribe and go check that out, because that really dives into the definitions of HSC and LSC adjusters here, the jounce cutoff adjuster here, and what that actually does to the shock and all the inner workings of what this shock features. That is your detailed video. We aren't going to dive into that here. This video is specifically for how it actually performs on the road and in the dirt. Now, before we get into it, I really want to be on the same page as you guys as far as what high speed means and what performance means. Performance to me means the suspension is keeping predictability and stability to the vehicle through all sorts of critical situations and in high speed environments like the desert, Barstow, Johnson Valley, places where there's the vehicle speeds really ramp up, and that suspension is doing the most work that it's capable of. Now, when I say high speed and low speed, we are talking shaft speeds of the shock. We're not talking vehicle speeds and how, miles per hour. These adjusters, high speed adjuster, low speed adjuster, this affects the shaft speeds of the shock. So just keep that in mind as we go forward in this review, because we'll be using some of those definitions interchangeably. To briefly go over what these settings do, this high speed compression adjuster will affect how fast or how slow this shock responds during a high speed event. A massive compression event like hitting a curb, hitting some whoops, where this shaft is really moving extremely fast through its stroke. The LSC, the low speed compression adjuster here, the gold, is going to affect more of the daily driven behaviors, driver inputs, turning, cornering, nosedive, braking. This affects how well or how much the shock is allowing that body to roll side to side or front to back. This also heavily influences how well the Tacoma is handling excessive loads. I've got a bumper here, got a winch here, got racks. Sometimes this Tacoma is loaded up with 500 pounds, 800 pounds, 1,000 pounds. And so these really make a big difference off-road, especially under a loaded Tacoma like this one. This JCO adjuster right here has 10 clicks, and this is effectively adjusting how firm or soft the internal bump stop is inside this shock. So we're not going to dive into the details, but there in the final bump zone of the 8112s is another shock inside here. And so being able to adjust your bump stop with these 10 clicks is just more adjustment to the entire system. With this level of shock, this stuff is expensive and you expect the best. And Bilstein definitely didn't cut any corners whatsoever in producing the best. Aluminum components, shocks, good springs, thick shafts, beautiful finish on the steel body. But one thing that isn't so obvious, that doesn't get talked about enough, is the longevity of a Bilstein product. They are just bar none one of the best manufacturers when it comes to designing a shock and producing a shock that will last. They're talking about 100,000 miles or more on these shocks. If you have any concerns or any issues before that, they want to see, because they want to know where it failed. They're using military level seal packages in these shocks to make sure the internals stay clean. It sees tons and tons of heat cycles without failure and without wear. So that's one thing that we're really excited about, because that really ups the bar for the entire industry that is usually used to more of a 30,000, 50,000 mile rebuild interval that frankly not a lot of us have the time or the money for. So really excited about that. That's not something that's very obvious here, and I think they should talk more about that, because that's really where you get a leg up in this kind of industry and in our kind of hobbies, where you need something to last a really long time, especially when you're investing this kind of money for something. So the 8112s in general are going to give you a really just comfortable on-road ride, and with the adjustable DSAs, that you can actually go much softer than what you will typically see out of a Bilstein 5100 or 6112. So really reduce that compression through the adjuster, really make it really soft on road. But if you're more apt to the performance and the handling of the vehicle, more of a driver rather than commuter, you can turn up those settings, get back to that firmer ride, and have more road feedback if that's your kind of driving style. In general, compared to everything else out of the box I've ever driven, and that's a Fox, and that's a King, and that's an Icon, these things are much softer overall. Let's not forget that these are a position-sensitive design. So Bilstein has really made that ride zone, daily driven ride zone, as plush as possible, while still maintaining performance, still maintaining handling. So that's one of the things that just really, really surprised me about this package, is how soft it got, because of how many vehicles we've driven on a 5100 or a 6112 that were, basically on rails out of the box. This is just a much different thing, and I really want to just drive that home, that these 8112s are not what Bilstein usually puts out there. And so really excited about that part. The other thing is about these LSC adjusters is they really help out when the vehicle is loaded down. Typically on road, in turns up driveways, you have that little extra slop on a shock that's just kind of too soft. And so sometimes I find myself like, we're loaded up and it's too soft. These make such a big noticeable difference to how the vehicle handles loads. And so typically, some people say, hey, how big of a difference do adjustable shocks make? And until you get in a set of them and start playing around with yourself, you kind of understate the effectiveness of adjusters. But once you're in these and you start playing around, you'll notice a massive difference in all sorts of situations. Click that like button. Yeah. Now, when you're off-road and you're on the mountain trails, you're in the slow, rocky terrain, you're rock crawling around and really just taking it easy, maybe you're loaded or unloaded, you got a lot of chatter that is usually transferred to the chassis. The ride zone of these 8112s really subdue a lot of that chatter. Naturally, it doesn't take it away, but it doesn't give you that harsh feedback that you regularly get on a poor setup. On bad shocks or improperly tuned setup, you're always bracing yourself for the slop in the vehicle. But the thing that I love about these shocks, it really creates that bottomless feel. So you might hit a large bump, but there's that transition to, stability and reset to neutral. Maybe you top out a little bit, it resets to neutral extremely well and extremely fast. We like to call that bottomless. And so that's just like a huge benefit that you just never really knew existed until you're on a really nice set of shocks. To me, these shocks remind me very much of my King 3.0s on my heavy duty 8,000 pound Ram. It's just that pillowy feel. Everything is just so bottomless. You got a lot of travel to play with, and that's basically mimicked in a shock much shorter and much shorter length of travel and on a different platform. So to me, these feel like one of the softest shocks I've ever tested hit in the mountains. And of course, don't forget about the settings. These are gonna really be your friend on those slower trails, loaded, unloaded. You want comfort, you want performance. These shocks can of course do all of that. I would say better than most of the rest of the guys. So I know a lot of you guys are wondering, is this appropriate for me? Absolutely, these shocks will definitely get it done. But let's talk about what these things were really built for, and that is speed. Now, when we say speed, we mean both vehicle speed and shaft speed. These things can literally handle anything you throw at them. I don't think I've ever ran a shock besides the SDI E-Click that just gave me bottomless suspension no matter which direction I took the vehicle. You know, when you're off-road in the dirt, I like to think of these dials basically being determined by my mood that day. Are we going fast? Are we jamming around? You know, just full send all over the place. I turn these things up to full firm because I want as much feedback, as much performance, and as much stability as possible. And so, you know, we dial in the JCO, we dial in the high-speed compression, we dial in the bypasses in the rear as well to really, you know, set the tone for the day. Full firm to me is top end, you know, at the highest ranges of performance needs. The reason why you make these full firm is because as you're jamming around and hitting whoops or unexpected obstacles, 40, 50 miles an hour, maybe 30 miles an hour, you want that shock to give as much resistance to that terrain as possible. And so you're not bouncing off the bump stops. And so that's really where these shocks excel. Just basically bottomless suspension through so much terrain. And so these off the bat gave me just so much confidence to literally hit anything I could look at and go anywhere I want and basically almost any speeds I want without worrying of destabilizing the vehicle in like critical situations. And so massive confidence boosters in this kind of package. If you're a little bit more chill, like a lot of our customers are, we've been out with plenty of them, you can dial these settings back and back to what I was mentioning before, where the softer the settings, the more you're allowing that shock to really move. And so that's also another kind of thing that we like, which is dial them in really soft, and these shocks can still produce that bottomless feel over terrain, and you're still moving and you're still keeping up, but maybe you aren't out front. These shocks can be comfortable while still chasing all your friends, rather than sometimes where we see a lot of people just bucking the front end, bucking the back end nonstop. These 8100s and 8112s will flatten out your vehicle in so much more of the terrain, and that's one of the things I really like. And with the adjustments on top, we're just fine-tuning. Anything you want to do with these shocks, fine-tune the fronts, fine-tune the rears, whether you got the DSAs in the rears or you get the bypasses in the rears. The options now to attack terrain at whatever speeds you want, whatever comfort level you want, that's just the most impressive thing about the DSA package in my opinion. Now, does this JCO adjuster do anything? The JCO, jounce cutoff, inside the shock is already kind of new to us, new to you guys. Now they stack on an adjuster. When we're out there testing with adjusters, high speed adjuster, low speed adjuster, rebound adjustment, compression adjustment, we've played with literally almost every single type of adjuster on the market across almost every single brand. And so when you see something new, super unique from someone like Bilstein, I'm naturally a little bit skeptical until I'm sitting in the truck and feeling it in my butt. And to say that we were surprised is kind of an understatement. We methodically went after figuring out just how much of a difference this JCO adjuster made during our experience. Now, a lot of these things can almost be indistinguishable between settings, but we ran the same line over and over and over again at pretty good speeds, because had lots of bumps, making the suspension move a lot. And so we were specifically testing out the high-speed compression adjuster in combination with the JCO adjuster. Now, we're talking about a lot of fine tuning here, so I'm sorry to lose some of you guys, but you're paying good money to have this kind of variability in your suspension, so stick with me. If one thing that we found out that was, we actually created a scenario where too much damping in the adjuster, the high-speed compression, was detrimental to performance. Because when you turn this high-speed adjuster up too much, it doesn't allow this shock to compress at all. And now your JCO is not doing anything because that shaft isn't actually moving into the bump zone. And so when your high-speed adjuster is too firm and you're not going fast enough to really move that shaft through the body and through the motion, then this JCO is not doing anything for you. You're actually just going to run out of room on your bump stop because it's just going to move the whole shock tower into your bump stop. Where the sweet spot is reducing the high-speed compression damping on your adjuster and allowing that shock to really move through the bump zone to engage the JCO. That's when you're really going to be able to feel the difference between the cutoff and the adjuster, full soft, full firm. And so we kind of try to get into that scenario to really see if we can feel a difference. So we ran the same line over and over again. We basically had the HSC at about 4 or 5 clicks, regularly running into, basically just kissing the bump stops on the suspension. And so we settled into the same line over and over and over again, and before we started really increasing the damping on the JCO adjuster. And surprisingly, you can feel when you're not running into that wall over and over again because of making the JCO firmer in this shock basically creates a kind of a bump zone that's just more compliant and more friendly to the speed of the shock, if that makes sense. So you've got 3 adjusters here. What really makes the biggest difference off-road is this high-speed compression adjuster, because improperly setting this too firm is really not going to allow this shock to move through its full range. And so you might be thinking to yourself, hey, I'm still hitting the bump stops, I need to go firmer on this adjuster. That's not the case. That's not what I experienced, at least. When I was hitting the bump stops on the frame, I actually had to back this off to go softer on the high-speed compression to allow the shock to actually move. When you allow that shock to move, then you're allowing the RCO and the JCO to do its job within the shock. When you're too firm, you're not allowing the shock to move at all. And so that's maybe counterintuitive to how some of you guys might be used to or not used to playing with adjustment settings on your shocks. If we learned anything about all your YouTube comments over the years, you're basically just going to ask us, are these better than Kings? Are these better than Fox? Are they better than Icon? Are they better than Dobinson's MRR? You know, I'll just go one by one. You know, some of these shocks, like King, yes, there are tuners out there that can tune an amazing shock, and hats off to them. We are not them. But oftentimes when we're in vehicles that have been tuned for comfort, yes, they're super comfortable on-road, but they really suffer off-road, or they need support like hydraulic bump stops in the front, or some other situation to where there's a give and take there. Fox's Performance Elite out of the box, not nearly as comfortable as these 8112s, and that's across numerous tests that we've done. Icon, I'm a huge fan of Icon, and I've ran Icon on this truck probably the most miles out of any shock so far, and Icon and these Bilstein feel very similar in that bottomless suspension feel when you really ramp up the speeds. And so I really, you know, Icon is probably one of my favorites out of the big 3 or the big 4 that I've tested. Are these better than a Dobinson's MRR? And I can't say that with full confidence because I haven't ran the MRRs on this vehicle itself. I've been in a 4Runner. I've played with a lot of adjustments on it, and I like it, but I didn't have free will to drive that fast. I really, really do like rebound adjustments on the Dobinsons though, and I feel like Rebound adjustment is kind of the understated, very valuable kind of feature on the Dobinsons and the Old Man Emu BP51s. I had the BP51s on the Tacoma before these 8112s, and while they were extremely comfortable and they could handle some pretty good speeds, they can't really keep up with this. The larger piston in these 8112s really make a huge difference when you're taking those really, really hard hits off-road, where the BP51s just ran out of travel way too fast. And so that's we'll have a bigger kind of a bigger video on deep dive comparison between all the shocks. But in general, if you guys are wondering if this is worth the $4,500 price tag for the fronts and the rears, absolutely. If you are getting after it off-road. And so, you know, that's where we're gonna be. We hope this helped a lot of you guys out. If you guys have any questions and you're still watching it up to this point, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Ask your questions for your application in the comments. We would really appreciate it. We'd love the feedback, and we'd love to know what you guys are thinking and what to produce next and what to review next. So really appreciate the attention, and we will see you guys on the trail.